I'd learned to tune out Marcus's voice years ago. My older brother had perfected the art of dismissal by the time I was 12, standing in our childhood kitchen while he mocked my science fair project about bacteria growth patterns. "That's adorable, Emma," he'd said, ruffling my hair like I was a particularly dim puppy. "Maybe stick to something simpler. Like coloring books." 20 years later, his tone hadn't changed. Just the setting. Now we were at my parents' house for Thanksgiving, the familiar dining room filled with the scent of roasted turkey and simmering resentment. Marcus sat at the head of the table. Dad's right hand, the golden child, the one who'd gotten his bachelor's degree in business from a state school and somehow parlayed it into a middle management position he never stopped talking about. "So, Emma," Marcus said, cutting into his turkey with the precision of a surgeon performing his 1,000th routine procedure. "Still taking those classes?" I looked up from my plate. "I'm finishing my dissertation, actually." Right. He waved his fork dismissively. "The PhD thing. How long has that been now?" 7 years. 8, I said evenly. Mom set down her wine glass with a soft clink. "Honey, don't you think it might be time to consider something more practical? Your cousin Jennifer just got her real estate license. She's doing very well." "I'm sure she is," I replied. "Because this academic thing," Dad interjected, "it's not really a career, is it? I mean, when are you actually going to start making money?" "You're 32 years old, Emma." Marcus leaned back in his chair, that familiar smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Come on, guys. Let's be supportive. Emma's going to be Dr. Williams someday. Doctor of, what was it again? Molecular biology? That's adorable." "Biochemistry and cellular biology," I corrected quietly, "with a focus on targeted protein degradation mechanisms in oncology." "See?" Marcus gestured at me with his fork. "Nobody even knows what that means. That's the problem with all this academic stuff. It's just word salad. You're hiding behind complicated language because there's nothing actually there." My younger sister, Claire, looked uncomfortable. She was the middle child, the one who'd become a nurse and therefore occupied a strange middle ground in the family hierarchy, respectable enough to avoid Dad's disappointment, but not successful enough to warrant Marcus's jealousy. "Emma's work is probably really important," she offered weakly. "Important?" Marcus laughed. "To who? Other people playing scientist in their little university bubbles? Meanwhile, I'm out here in the real world, managing a team of 15 people, making actual contributions to the economy." "You're an assistant regional manager at a logistics company," I said. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "I'm sorry." Marcus's smile had frozen on his face. "I'm just clarifying," I said calmly. "You said you manage 15 people. I was clarifying your position." Dad's face reddened. "Emma, your brother works very hard at a respectable job. Not everyone needs to hide in a classroom forever, playing with test tubes and pretending they're going to cure cancer or something." The irony wasn't lost on me, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd learned that skill over years of family dinners like this one. Years of being the disappointment, the one who'd wasted her 20s in graduate school while Marcus climbed the corporate ladder and Claire got married and had 2 kids. "Speaking of cancer," Mom said, clearly trying to redirect the conversation, "did you hear about Martha's daughter? Stage 2 breast cancer. Only 35 years old. It's just terrible." "Horrible," Marcus agreed. "That's real life, you know. Real problems that actual doctors deal with. Not sitting around theorizing about proteins or whatever." I took a sip of water. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. "The thing is, Emma," Dad continued, "we're just worried about you. This PhD program, it's been nearly a decade. Don't you think it might be time to admit that maybe this isn't your calling? There's no shame in changing direction. You could go back to school, get a teaching certificate, become a high school science teacher. That's respectable. Or real estate," Mom added. "Jennifer really is doing wonderfully." Marcus leaned forward, his voice taking on that particular tone of false concern that he'd perfected over the years. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you because someone needs to say it. This whole academic thing, it's escapism. You're hiding from the real world because you're afraid you can't make it out here. And I get it, I do. Not everyone is cut out for professional success. But you're not a kid anymore, Emma. At some point you need to face reality." "What reality is that?" I asked. "That you're not research material. You're not going to be some groundbreaking scientist. You're not going to cure diseases or win a Nobel Prize or whatever fantasy you've been chasing. You're a decent student who went to community college. I went to community college for 2 years to save money, I interrupted quietly. Then I transferred to Cornell. And now you're trying to pretend you're in the same league as people who went to real universities their whole lives. People who actually have the intellectual capacity for high-level research. My phone buzzed again. And again. Claire shifted uncomfortably. Marcus, that's a little harsh. It's honest, he cut her off. And Emma needs to hear it. How much debt are you in, Emma? How much have you borrowed for this degree that's never going to lead anywhere? I have a full scholarship, I said. Plus a research stipend. Oh wow. A stipend. Marcus laughed. What's that, like 20,000 a year? I make 6 figures, Emma. 6 figures. Because I live in the real world and made real choices. Dad nodded approvingly. Your brother has a point. There's dignity in honest work. In practical careers. This obsession with being some kind of elite intellectual. It's not healthy. And frankly, it's not realistic for someone with your background. My background, I repeated. You know what I mean, Dad said uncomfortably. You were never the academic type. You were always more average. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being average. But this pretending to be something you're not. My phone started ringing. Oh, for heaven's sake, Mom said. Can't you silence that thing? We're having family time. I pulled out my phone. The screen showed an incoming call from a Cambridge, Massachusetts number. I recognized it immediately. I'd been staring at it for months, waiting, hoping. I need to take this, I said, standing. Of course you do, Marcus said. Can't let your fantasy world wait. I walked into the kitchen, my heart pounding. Hello. Dr. Williams? This is Dr. Patricia Chin, director of the Broad Institute at MIT and Harvard. I apologize for calling on the holiday, but we've just received the final approval from the patent office, and I wanted to be the first to congratulate you personally. My hand tightened on the phone. The patent was approved? Not just approved, Dr. Williams. Fast-tracked. The preliminary valuations are coming in at $2.8 billion. Your targeted protein degradation platform for solid tumor cancers. Emma, you've revolutionized the field. We're already fielding calls from major pharmaceutical companies. Pfizer wants an exclusive licensing deal. So does Merck. The NIH is calling this the most significant breakthrough in oncology in 30 years. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my legs suddenly unsteady. Dr. Williams? Are you there? I'm here, I managed. I know this is overwhelming. Which is why I'm calling personally. We'd like to offer you a full professorship, not assistant, full professor, and your own research institute. The university is prepared to invest $50 million in startup funding for your lab. You'd have complete autonomy, your pick of postdocs and graduate students, and a salary of, well, we can discuss specifics, but I think you'll be very pleased. From the dining room, I could hear Marcus's voice. She's probably talking to one of her little academic friends, comparing notes on their imaginary research. Dr. Williams, Dr. Chin continued, I realize this is sudden. But your work on selective protein degradation using novel molecular glues, it's going to save lives. Hundreds of thousands of lives. Maybe millions. The clinical trial data you've generated is extraordinary. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer patients showing complete remission. Glioblastoma tumors disappearing. This isn't just a breakthrough. This is a paradigm shift. When do you need an answer? I asked quietly. Take the weekend to think about it. But Emma, and I hope you don't mind me using your first name, I've been in this field for 30 years. I've never seen anything like this. You're going to be the youngest person to receive the Lasker Award. Potentially the Nobel. The scientific community is already buzzing. Your paper drops in Nature next week and it's going to change everything. I closed my eyes. Thank you, Dr. Chin. No, Dr. Williams. Thank you. On behalf of every cancer patient and their families, thank you. I ended the call and stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at my phone. The congratulatory emails were already flooding in. Harvard, Stanford, Memorial Sloan Kettering, the Mayo Clinic. Every major research institution in the world, it seemed, had gotten word of the patent approval. When I walked back into the dining room, Marcus was mid-sentence. Playing pretend in a laboratory somewhere, mixing chemicals and calling it research. It's honestly embarrassing. I have colleagues who ask me what my sister does, and I have to explain that she's a professional student who... He stopped when he saw my face. Everything okay? Claire asked carefully. I sat down and placed my phone face down on the table. That was Dr. Patricia Chen from the Broad Institute at MIT and Harvard. The what institute? Mom asked. One of the world's leading biomedical research centers, I said. She was calling to inform me that my patent application was approved today. Marcus snorted. A patent? For what? A new way to waste taxpayer money on targeted protein degradation for solid tumor cancers, I continued evenly. The preliminary valuation is $2.8 billion. Several pharmaceutical companies are already bidding for exclusive licensing rights. The room went very, very quiet. Dad set down his fork slowly. 2.8 billion? The technology allows for selective degradation of cancer-causing proteins that were previously considered undruggable. Early clinical trials are showing complete remission in stage 4 pancreatic cancer, glioblastoma, triple-negative breast cancer, and several other previously terminal diagnoses. Marcus's face had gone pale. That's not. Dr. Chen also offered me a full professorship at Harvard Medical School, along with my own research institute and $50 million in startup funding for my lab. Mom's wine glass slipped from her fingers, red wine spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. My paper is being published in Nature next week, I continued in the same calm tone. Dr. Chen mentioned something about the Lasker Award. Possibly the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, though that's obviously speculation at this point. Claire was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Emma, you're going to cure cancer? Not cure, I corrected. But significantly improve treatment outcomes for solid tumor cancers that currently have very poor prognosis. The 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer is currently around 11%. In our trials, we're seeing 92% complete remission after 18 months of treatment. Dad's mouth was opening and closing like a fish. But, you went to community college. For 2 years. Then Cornell for undergrad summa cum laude. Then Harvard for my PhD. I've been working in Dr. James Patterson's lab for the past 6 years. He won the Nobel in 2019. I was his lead researcher on the project that earned him that prize, but my name wasn't on the paper because I was still a graduate student. This work, my patent, is independent of his research. Marcus found his voice, though it came out strangled. You're making this up. You're lying. I picked up my phone and pulled up the email from the patent office. I turned it around so everyone could see. Application approved. Patent number US 11,234,567 B2. Assigned to Emma Catherine Williams. Current valuation estimate, $2.8 billion, subject to licensing negotiations. I scrolled to the next email. This is from Pfizer's VP of Oncology Research. They're offering $400 million upfront for exclusive licensing rights, plus royalties. Merck is offering $450 million. Johnson & Johnson came in at $380 million with a higher royalty structure. $400 million, Mom whispered. That's just the upfront licensing fee from one company. The patent is valued at $2.8 billion because the market potential over the next 20 years is estimated at $50 to $75 billion annually once the treatment platform is fully developed and approved for multiple cancer types. I scrolled further. This is from MIT's Office of the President. This is from Harvard Medical School's Dean. This is from the Director of the National Cancer Institute. This is from the Nobel Assembly at the Karolinska Institute. Apparently my work is already being discussed for next year's prize, though obviously nothing is confirmed. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. This isn't real. You're not a real scientist. Yes, Emma. You're the one who couldn't even get into a real university without starting at community college. You're the one who's been playing in a laboratory for 8 years while I've been building a real career. Managing 15 people at a logistics company, I said quietly. For $103,000 a year according to what you mentioned at Claire's birthday. That's a respectable salary, Marcus. You should be proud of it. His face flushed red. Don't you dare. The licensing deal I'm likely to accept will pay me a $400 million signing bonus, plus 8% royalties on all future revenue. Conservative estimates put my personal earnings over the next decade at approximately $4 to $6 billion. After taxes, I'll probably keep around half of that. Dad looked like he might be having a heart attack. Billion. With AB. I'll also receive the full professorship salary, around $300,000 annually, which is honestly negligible compared to the patent revenue, but it comes with the research autonomy I want. The institute they're building for me will have a $50 million initial budget, expanding to around $100 to $150 million per year once we're fully operational. Claire was crying. I wasn't sure if it was from shock or something else. Do you remember Martha's daughter? I asked Mom gently. The one you mentioned with breast cancer? If it's triple-negative breast cancer, and statistically that's likely given her age, my treatment could save her life. That's why I do this work. Not for the money. Not for the accolades. For Martha's daughter and the millions of other people who get diagnosed with terminal cancer every year. Marcus sat back down heavily. I don't understand. How did we not know? Because you never asked, I said simply. For 8 years, every time we had a family dinner, you made jokes about my little academic hobby and my pretend research. You never once asked what I was actually working on, what my research was, what results I was getting. You just assumed that because I started at community college, because I wasn't flashy or corporate or making 6 figures right out of school, that I must be failing. But you never said anything, Mom protested weakly. You never told us you were working on something so important. I tried. 3 years ago at Christmas I mentioned that my early trial results were promising. Dad said I was getting ahead of myself, and suggested I consider getting a teaching certificate instead. 2 years ago at Easter, I mentioned that Nature had reached out about publishing my preliminary findings. Marcus said academic publications were meaningless circle jerks and that real success happened in the business world. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. Last year at Thanksgiving, exactly 1 year ago today, I tried to explain what targeted protein degradation was. You all stopped listening after 30 seconds. Marcus said I was trying too hard to sound smart, and that I should stick to community college level thinking. The silence in the room was deafening. The truth is, I continued, you didn't want to know. Because knowing would have required you to reconsider your entire narrative about who I am. It was easier to believe I was the family failure, the disappointment, the one who couldn't hack it in the real world. It justified your own choices. It made Marcus feel better about his middle management position. It made Dad feel vindicated for pushing me toward practical careers. It gave Mom something to worry about and fix. I picked up my phone as it buzzed again. Another congratulatory email, this one from Stanford's president. I need to go, I said. Dr. Chen wants to schedule a meeting with MIT and Harvard's leadership tomorrow to discuss the specifics of the offer. I have a flight to Boston at 6 a.m. tomorrow, Mom said. But it's Thanksgiving weekend. We were going to have leftovers and talk about how I'm wasting my life. I asked, not unkindly. How I need to be more like Marcus. How I should get a real job. Nobody answered. I grabbed my coat from the hallway closet. Claire followed me to the door. Emma, she said quietly. I'm sorry. I should have stuck up for you more. I should have asked about your work. It's okay, I said and meant it. Claire had her own struggles with this family. She'd chosen nursing specifically because it was respectable enough to avoid Dad's disappointment but not ambitious enough to trigger Marcus's jealousy. She'd played it safe her whole life. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. When Marcus was going on and on about his management position and his 6-figure salary, did you already know? About the patent approval. I paused at the door. I've known the patent was likely to be approved for about 6 months. The valuation estimates have been floating around for 3 months. Dr. Chen's offer has been on the table, pending patent approval for 2 months. So you just sat there. Through all of it. Knowing. I've been sitting through it for 8 years, Claire. What's one more dinner? She hugged me suddenly, fiercely. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I don't understand what you do, but I'm proud of you. I hugged her back. Thank you. As I drove away from my parents' house, my phone rang again. This time it was Dr. James Patterson, my former advisor, the Nobel laureate. Emma. I just heard. Congratulations, don't even begin to cover it. This is extraordinary work. Truly extraordinary. Thank you, Dr. Patterson. I have to ask, and please don't take this the wrong way, but why didn't you publish sooner? You've had viable results for over a year. You could have published in Nature last year and gotten the same recognition. I smiled even though he couldn't see it. I wanted to be sure. I wanted the clinical trial data to be absolutely bulletproof. I wanted every possible criticism addressed before publication. That's the mark of a true scientist, he said warmly. Though I suspect there might be another reason. I didn't answer. Your family, perhaps? The ones who never quite understood what you were doing. Maybe, I admitted. Emma, you don't owe them a dramatic revelation. You don't owe them anything. I know. But maybe I owed it to myself. To know absolutely that I'd succeeded on my own terms. Not on theirs. Not according to their definition of success. On mine. He was quiet for a moment. You're going to do remarkable things, Dr. Williams. This is just the beginning. After we hung up, I drove in silence for a while, processing everything. My phone continued to buzz with congratulatory messages, interview requests, collaboration proposals. Stanford. Cambridge. The Mayo Clinic. Memorial Sloan Kettering. Every major cancer research institution in the world wanted to work with me. But all I could think about was Marcus's face when he realized. When the reality of it finally broke through his carefully constructed narrative. When he understood that his little sister, the one he'd been mocking for 8 years, the one he'd dismissed as a perpetual student, the one who'd started at community college, had just revolutionized cancer treatment. And more than that, when he realized that I'd known. That I'd sat through his condescension and Dad's disappointment and Mom's worry, knowing exactly what I'd achieved and chosen to say nothing. Because nothing I said would have mattered. Because they wouldn't have believed me anyway. Because the only thing that would ever make them understand was external validation from someone they considered an authority. My phone rang again. Another Cambridge number. Dr. Williams? This is Catherine Walsh from the Nobel Foundation. I'm calling on behalf of the Assembly. I pulled over to the side of the road to take the call. Behind me, in my parents' dining room, I imagined the conversation that must be happening. Marcus scrambling to Google my name and finding it everywhere. Nature, Science, the New England Journal of Medicine, the New York Times Science section. Dad trying to reconcile the daughter he'd dismissed with the woman the world's leading institutions were calling a revolutionary scientist. Mom, wondering how she'd missed it, how her daughter had been working on something this important and she'd never noticed. But I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. And ready to get back to work. Because in the end that's what mattered. Not Marcus's validation. Not Dad's approval. Not Mom's understanding. The work mattered. The cancer patients who would live because of my research. They mattered. Everything else was just noise. Dr. Williams? Catherine Walsh said. The Assembly would like to schedule a preliminary review meeting for next month. This is highly unusual, but given the significance of your breakthrough and the clinical trial results, we believe there's sufficient justification to expedite the process. I took a deep breath. I'd be honored. As I drove toward the airport, my phone lit up one final time. A text from Claire. Dad just looked you up. He's having a panic attack. Mom is crying. Marcus locked himself in the bathroom. Emma, what do I do? I thought about it for a moment, then typed back. Nothing. Let them process it. I'll call you next week. Then I turned off my phone and drove into the night toward Boston, toward my new life, toward the research that actually mattered. Behind me, my family was finally understanding what I'd tried to tell them for 8 years. But I was already moving forward. Because that's what scientists do. We keep moving forward. Always.